Hello everyone, today we're gonna go over decals in general. We're gonna see what they are, where to obtain them, what a material for a decal looks like, some problems you might come across, applying 3D effects to decals, such as the one you see here on screen, and then I will show you how to create simple decals such as these two. So first of all, a decal is a material that gets projected onto other surfaces to give extra detail. They can be blood stains, dirt, cracks, etc. You can either obtain them from marketplaces such as Fab. If you go to the left panel under decals, you'll see all the different ones that you have. I understand that now the Quixel assets are not free any longer, so I will also be showing you how to create some at the end of the video. Once you download a decal, you'll find that the master material for that decal looks something like this. It's basically just a normal material that we've gone over in previous tutorials, except here, if we just click anywhere on the blueprint or here, we'll see that the material domain is a deferred decal and the blend mode is translucent. That's how we obtain these volumes that we can place around our world and add extra detail. As you can see, if I move the volume, the decal will be applied to the mesh that it overlaps. So let's go over all the different components. Here we can find the base color and opacity. The base color simply goes into a base color adjustments. This is so that then in the material instance we can control the saturation, brightness, contrast, and a tint. And then the opacity is obtained by the alpha channel of this texture. When we create our master materials for our own decals, which is this one and this one, we are going to change how the opacity works. Since one of the problems you may come across are these. When the texture stretches too much on vertical surfaces, even though you're projecting only downward, and when the decal leaks through to the other side of the mesh. The final result would be something like this, where we no longer project the decal on the surface of the wall, and the decal no longer leaks through the mesh. These are the ones by default that I just downloaded from Fab, and these are the ones I edited. These are the two that we're going to create later, which I think I already mentioned. So let's go back here. So this is covered. Well, here they multiply the alpha channel by an opacity intensity, simply to have a bit more control in the material instance. Then we have the ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic, which is also obtained from a single texture. Each comes from a different channel. So the ambient occlusion comes from the red, roughness from the green. Again, we have a few nodes here that will give us extra control in the material instance, and then the metallic simply comes from the blue channel. The normal is really easy. Again, another parameter that will give us more control in the material instance. We are not going to use the displacement at all. In fact, by default, it's not even connected. Then we have the UV manipulations. This we're gonna also change. So we are able to choose to give the decal a 3D effect, such as with the tire tracks or these footprints. But we will basically be copying this, maybe altering a bit and then adding a few things, and then The specular is a simple parameter that we can adjust. So let's go to our first master material. So this one is the one I created. I simply created a new material and then copy pasted everything from here. Make sure that the material domain is deferred decal and then the blend mode translucent. The color we kept everything by default, but we removed the calculations of opacity and we put them somewhere separate. Ambient occlusion, roughness and metallic we keep how it is. And then the normal we also keep how it is. And now we're gonna go over the changes we made. So to obtain my UVs, for people that don't know, this is a reroute declaration node. If I don't want the material to have constantly like lines all over the place, I would create something like this. So from the pin that we want, we simply drag, type reroute declaration node, name it whatever you want, and then you can always call it later on. So to get our UVs, I first made a static switch parameter to be able to turn the 3D effect off and on. First we're going to go through the false, so the normal UVs. This looks different from what we have, but I believe it's more or less the same. We simply copy and paste, we'll be able to compare. As you can see, we use a texture coordinate that is multiplied and then added to a result. Here we have X and Y, and here we also have X and Y. To get this node, we simply have to press 4 on the keyboard and then left click. I converted it to a parameter, which is right click and convert to parameter, name it whatever you want. And then within the values, I put 1 for tiling X, 1 for tiling Y, and then 0 for the other two. I believe you can use these calculations also. I can't remember exactly why I was using this, but it works. So feel free to use any of those two. And then this result is what we're going to plug into the false. So this will be the normal UVs of our decal. If we go to our landscape and let's get this one, and we change, let's close fab already. And we change let me just check UV controls, it's in group none, so it should be here. As you can see, we can change the length of the x-axis and the y-axis through here. We can also change the offset, so it gives us a bit more control, although I suggest just leaving it by default. This would be 1, this would be 1. Okay. Next, once we have our default UVs, to give the 3D effect, we're going to use the bump offset advanced node. And here we're going to use 4 of the pins. The first one requires a height texture. I made a parameter that will contain the height texture, and I also made a channel mask parameter. So that depending on the decal and the textures they have, I can always choose the right channel for that texture without having to edit the main material. So in this case, if I go to this texture, we can see that the height map is stored in the red channel, since height maps are of a scale of white to black. So by default, I have the red channel activated and this is plugged into my height texture. But within my within my material instance, I can change the channel of the height map. So right now it's in red channel, but I could change it to green, blue, or alpha depending on the texture that I have. I should also change the group to a height. Next thing is that we promoted this pin to a parameter so we can control how strong the 3D effect is. For the texture coordinates, we simply got our UVs and plugged it directly here. And for our camera vector, we would normally get this node, camera vector, and simply plug it in. But decals behave in a different way and we have to do some transformations in order for it to look properly and avoid future errors. So I'm going to leave this on the screen so you can copy it. Basically what we're getting here is a set value of 1. We transform the vector from local space to world space. We then normalize it. And this might be a bit confusing, but we have to plug it into the basis x. The y then will have to be plugged into the basis y, and then -1x will have to be plugged into the basis z. And our UVs should be all set up. The next thing we changed is the opacity. So what we just did here is to have the possibility to have a 3D effect such as this one. I'm gonna actually, let's see what the parameters do. So as you can see, our bump offset is ticked, so it's on. And if we change the height ratio input, which was this parameter here, we can see that the 3D effect becomes stronger, or if we go to negative numbers, it's like it's going down into the plane. This is up to you. I found that a value of 0.01 is enough to look okay. Let's leave this back. The next part that we're editing is the opacity. And this is so we avoid the stretching problems and the leaking through objects problem. What we're basically going to do is get the object orientation and compare the angle to the angle at which the decal is projected, and if the angles are closer to one another, it will be visible, otherwise it won't. Let's start from the beginning. So this part here is what you would normally do with a normal opacity calculation. We're getting a texture. Again, we're doing the same thing we did here. By the way, I didn't explain how to do it. You simply type mask, component mask. We can convert it to a parameter, name it whatever you want, and that way we'll be able to edit the different channels within the material instance. I simply added this because the decals I created and the ones I downloaded don't have the same textures, and the alpha channel is not always stored in the correct channel. The same channel as others. So for this one, again, if I open it, we can see that the alpha channel is stored in the alpha mask is stored in the alpha channel. So by default, this will have the A, but if we look at our footprints, the channel for the alpha is ticked red, green, and blue. Since if we open this, we want this map to be the alpha channel, except we want the black color to be displayed and the white one to be hidden. And that's also a reason why we have this switch, to invert the alpha channel or not. Normally, I apologize if this is confusing, I'm not explaining myself properly. If we go to this texture, which is the one I downloaded from Fab, the red channel has the height map. Red, green, and blue contain the color of it itself. And then the alpha channel contains the alpha mask. Normally, you want the white parts to be displayed and the black parts to be opaque. To have an opacity of a 100. With this texture, which is the one I created, and I'll show you later how, we have the colors inverted, meaning that the white has to be opacity 100% and the black is what will be displayed in the surface where we apply the decal. That's the only reason for this part. Then we have a normal multiply, which is multiplied by an opacity factor, simply to have a bit more control in the material instance. And here's where we do the comparing angles, so we don't have the stretch marks or the leak through the mesh. We will need the object orientation. You then multiply it by a value of -1. We transform the vector from tangent space to world space and normalize the vector. And then we need the scene texture world normal. So if you type scene texture and click the node here, we can select the world normal. And then the data that we need is stored in the color pin. And this is what we will plug into the dot node. Then we will multiply it by a mask factor, which I'll show you what it does later on. Saturate it, so the value is between 0 and 1. And then finally multiply that by our opacity calculations. That way, when we are using material instances, we can control what texture we're using for the alpha mask, what channel the alpha mask is stored in, whether or not we need to invert the alpha mask so it's seen properly. We can multiply it by an opacity factor to increase or decrease the opacity. And with this parameter, we will also be able to control the angle at which the decal starts disappearing compared to the surface where it is projected onto. Hopefully what I said makes sense. And we go back to our landscape and open this material instance. As you can see here, my mask factor, I changed it to 4, since if we leave it by 1, you'll see that because we have rotated the volume of the decal, it has started to, here. If we go back to where it was, the decal is fully visible as soon as we start tilting it, because it doesn't correspond with the angle of the surface. It starts disappearing, which is why we have this control. We can increase it so it looks exactly how we want it, but we still don't have any stretch marks, or it's not leaking through, unlike the ones that we have by default. This one is completely parallel to the surface. This one is a bit rotated, and you see what the results would be. This one is the same as this one, but we've simply kept it parallel to the surface, and this one we've tilted so you can see the difference. And I think that about covers it. On to the next part. So now we've changed our UVs, so we can choose between 3D effect or not. And we also have control over some settings that will allow us to at least mitigate some of the problems decals have by default. Another thing I wanted to mention is that I have created 2 master materials for my decals. This one is called Decal Master Color, and this one is called Decal Master. They are exactly the same, except for the one called Decal Master. I don't have the color or the roughness, metallic, or ambient occlusion, since here I'm only interested in the opacity and the normal. The reason for this is because I'm doing some experiments with decals to add extra detail to our landscapes, which I probably bring a future tutorial on how I did this. But basically, when putting tire tracks or the footprints, I'm not interested in the color, since I want the decals to blend completely with the landscape. And the only thing I need from these are the normal maps and the opacity. And the way to eliminate the color from being projected at all is simply not to plug anything. I have tried and failed to add a switch here so we could control those things. Because let's say, for example, that I wanted to place this blood stain on my landscape. But I don't want the normal to be the one that comes by default with the blood, which is simply flat. I want the normal to be the one that the landscape has. The way I could achieve this would be to simply disconnect the normal pin and then apply it. And as you can see now, our decal is using the normal from underneath. I would like to have control over each material instance, but by adding a switch parameter, then plug this into normal. For starters, I need a pin to go into the false output. If I put a 0, and let's say it defaults to this look, I don't know why. And then even if I try to get material attributes, let's put a normal and plug in a normal that contains no information, the result is still the same. So I'm not sure how we would do it with switches. Right now, what I found as the best solution is to have several decal master materials, and each of them apply to different decals depending on whether I want the color to be shown just the normal, like in these cases. And if I wanted one where only the color shows but not the normal, I would have to simply unplug the normal. So it looks like this. Okay, let me just reset everything to how it was. Now, if you don't have the possibility of downloading Decals, I'm gonna show you a quick way to create your own. I mean, you can always use Photoshop and something like this, but I don't have those skills, so I try to figure another way out. And it depends what you're aiming for. If, like me, you just want decals with a normal and a height map, what I did is this. I'm using Canva, which is free, and then I downloaded a photograph of a footprint. I desaturated the image completely. I then, here we go to edit and adjust. I increase the brightness, the whites, the blacks. You can even touch the contrast. And with the brush, if I remember correctly, you can select, let's say, this, and then you can increase the brightness, as you can see. So it looks completely white. Since this was the method that I found that worked, that's the reason why then in Unreal Engine we have to invert the alpha mask, since what we want to make opacity 100% is the white zones. Once I had this image, I simply duplicated it and downloaded this one. And then for bloodstains, it was actually much easier. I simply got some elements which are free, added them here, made them completely white and black by desaturating them, increasing contrast, etc. I duplicated this page and then changed the colors to what I wanted them to be. When you click on a shape, you can always change the color here. But since we've desaturated, you won't see a thing. But basically, for a blood effect, you need one with color, and then this one, which will be the alpha mask. Which, by the way, this node is 1-. For my footprint image, I did need a normal map, and the way I found to solve that is to go to this website, which I will leave the link in the description. Here you can simply upload your image and it will create a normal map for your image, and the result is this. So this is the one we downloaded from Canva, and this is the normal map that the website created, which I think is more than enough for the effect that I was looking for. Of course, if you have knowledge on Photoshop or any other designing software, your results will be much better. But this is just a quick solution that you can use to start experimenting with decals and see what you like, what works for you, and what fits your level. I think that was everything I wanted to cover for today. After this video, the next one will probably be how to use splines, procedural content generation, and decals to create these sort of pathways. But I still have a bit of experimenting to do with this, so that's it. I hope you find the video useful, that these solutions are helpful, and that you like the video. If you did like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.